Hello, my name is Frances Widdowson, and for those of you who follow my YouTube channel, you will know that I recently did a video on the documents that I am going to be using for the Academic Freedom Destroyed, the University of Lethbridge Clown Show presentation that I'm going to be doing tomorrow, which is March 2nd, 2024. And what I did in that other video is that I went through all the various documents that are going to form the basis of the evidence that I am going to use to make the points that I need to make tomorrow. And because it's such a complicated file with all these different documents for what Paul Viminetz has called the Widdowson affair, it's best to have a discussion of all these documents. And when I was going through all these documents and trying to prepare the first video, I noticed that the most significant of these documents are the documents that pertain to the activities of various professor-ideologues. And so these are professors who are not academics. They are professors who have a particular activist position, and then they try to cancel any ideas that they think are inconsistent with their own ideas. And that is completely destructive to an academic institution. Anyway, this is a major problem at the University of Lethbridge that I wanted to talk to you today about. And I didn't want to include it in the other video because that would have just bogged down all the other materials in that other video. So what I want to do is spend this video going through some of the documents pertaining to the Professor-Ideologues at the University of Lethbridge. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to share my screen so we can go into these particular documents. And what I'm going to do is, so this is the wokeacademy.info site, and I am going to go into this first post, which is the documents pertaining to the upcoming Frances Widdowson YouTube video, and then go down. I talked about this, all these other documents in the first video, but what I want to do is go directly into the link that I provided of one of the posts, Academic Freedom Destroyed, the University of Lethbridge Clown Show. So it's this link, and in this link, the post that this link links to, there is the materials on the professors. So Professor-Ideologues, number 3. And there are a number of posts about the Professor-Ideologues at the University of Lethbridge. One concerns all the professors that I found were engaging in these kinds of ideological types of activities. The other posts concern a particular faculty member whose name is Carolyn Hodes. And Carolyn Hodes is a women and gender studies professor. And the reason why I would like to focus quite a bit of attention on Carolyn Hodes is because, unlike the other professors who just had one or two posts or sent one or two emails to administrators, Carolyn Hodes keeps on coming back into this. So it's only fair that she should receive attention about the things that she has been discussing publicly. And I think her case is quite helpful in understanding some of the problems that exist at the University of Lethbridge. Anyway, so I'm just going to go into this post called Censorious Comments from 15 University of Lethbridge Professors. And what you will see in this post is that we have sort of a description of some of the more ideological claims that are being made and support for cancellation. And then what I do is, once I kind of describe the highlights, then I provide the email that this professor sent to an administrator, or often CC to others, and then the administrator's response to the email that was sent. And we see the various professors and their affiliations. And I should mention Dina McMartin, who is a geography professor. She is an administrator now, and I believe she's in quite a high up post, vice president, I believe, of research. So I was kind of wondering when I saw her name why she was getting CC'd on things, and it's because she was actually an administrator. So this is something that there's crossover between administrators. Anyway, you can see some of the different disciplines that they're associated with, and then kinds of interactions that happen with other administrators. And I'm just going down here, and attachments. So for example, Paul Mackenzie Jones, who is the chair of Indigenous Studies, he was also involved in creating a statement on behalf of the entire Indigenous Studies department about what he perceived to be the terrible things that I was going to be discussing at this speech, and that my talk should be canceled and so on. Anyway, so these are all, and there's Carolyn Hodes. So that's the Carolyn Hodes email. But I will spend a little bit more time talking about her and the other posts as well. And this is done in chronological order, I believe. Carrie Godfrey is a dean and also vice provost. Anyway, he had this interaction with a number of different professors. Andrea Amelink is particularly notable because she used to be the president of the University of Lethbridge Faculty Association, which of course was one of the key figures in the Tony Hall case, which he will be talking about more in about a month's time, but I will briefly go into that. And then there's Glenda Bonifacio, Women and Gender Studies, and an attachment that came with her email was this SNAC Plus group, which is the Student Support Network for Academic of Color, and I assume that's Academics of Color Plus. And this is a statement that they put out. Other professors, and then as well, the reason why I'm scrolling down here is, in addition to the emails that were sent to administrators, we have a number of professors who made comments on social media that I also was compiling at the time, which is, not as significant as the emails, because the emails are done in an official professorial capacity, but still they give one a bit of an understanding of the tone and the whole climate which exists at the University of Lethbridge. So we have, about 20 people who are either publicly or through their emails to administration, really showing that they are not tolerant of different points of view, and they are not interested in trying to figure out the truth by looking at views that differ from their own. They are basically putting forward what they believe is the truth and trying to exclude all those other views that they disagree with. And then finally, the last thing on this posting is an email that I received on February 1st. You can see from the date there, and I blacked out this person's name in case they do receive reprisals from this. And this wasn't a public email. All those other emails were released in the document dump from the University of Lethbridge with respect to the Charter Challenge. So they're all public, part of the public record now. And this was sent to me privately. And it was when I was going to be doing the Zoom talk on February 1st, after my public space had been rescinded. And this professor, in communicating with me, said that there are many professors who wanted to attend the Zoom talk, but they didn't want to contact me personally because they were concerned about making their interests known. So this gives you a sense of the fear that exists at the University of Lethbridge, that you would have a professor who wouldn't even want to request a Zoom link. And that doesn't even say that they agree with what I'm saying or anything. Just to be known that you would be a person who would listen to these views is something that could impact you negatively. Anyway, so all of these emails are on this post with my descriptions of the particular significant aspects of them, which I think is the key feature of the problems at the University of Lethbridge. So when I was in the other video, when I was looking at the 4 internal destroyers of the University of Lethbridge, it's true that administrators are in charge, they're the leaders. So it's very disappointing to see them act in the way that they did. But then you consider that they're getting all this pressure from these professor-ideologues. And in this day and age, when universities are corporations, if you don't have faculty members standing up for academic freedom, it's very difficult to see how administrators are going to do this. And as well, with respect to the faculty association, it's the professor-ideologues who are often the most vocal and organized. So you can see how they could take over the faculty associations as well. And then you have these professors as well engaged in indoctrinating students. And so when we look at the most significant problem that exists at the University of Lethbridge, we have to sort of look at the professoriate there and see what's happening there. And there recently was an article written, which I'm still trying to get a hold of, about an administrator in a university in Canada who was talking about how horrible it is to be an administrator, because there's been all this hiring of new professors who don't really understand the academic mission of the university. And so with all the new professors that are being hired, we have serious problems with respect to the culture of universities. And we have to face this head on, is that this is a very difficult problem. How do we change the culture of the universities? And the first way of dealing with this is to recognize the problem. So I just wanted to briefly look at some of these emails, which I think are the most significant. So Lauren Doe, who's a sociology professor, he talks about white supremacist violence. So he implies that that allowing me to speak would show that the University of Lethbridge is a place of white supremacist violence. And then this is, the Dean Letts, responds to this in a favorable way. So that's the other thing, is this kind of loop of encouragement and pandering that goes on from administrators. Christine Alexander was the one who booked the talk from Sean Carlton at exactly the same time, intentionally making it so it would be difficult for people to attend both of those events, which I personally, if I were a professor at the University of Lethbridge, would want to do. I'd want to look at the different views and then ask questions and be able to come to a better understanding. But this is all very epistemically tribalist and trying to separate people out into different kinds of positions. This Amanda Fox from Education, this was an interesting one, because Robin Bright, who is a dean, she is responding to Amanda Fox, and then Robin Bright got on social media and was favorably responding to a student organization called the University of Lethbridge Education Undergraduate Society, and encouraging this totalitarian student organization. So again, and these documents are all there. So that's why that's a very interesting one for that reason. Paul Mackenzie Jones, he says that I'm a well-known residential school denialist whose views are violent. And this is what we hear time and time again, is this idea that views are violent, which is a very irresponsible way of putting this, because it really does justify physical, sort of responses to the expression of ideas. So it's a way of escalating these kinds of conflicts. And he's responded favorably again by Matthew Letts, the dean. And then he provides this this statement that was put out by the Indigenous Studies Department. And the issue that he takes with me, with my views, that this Indigenous Studies Department, is that I disagree with the Truth and Reconciliation's classification of the residential school systems as genocide. And that is this is also the position of J.R. Miller and I believe Donald Smith, two very, very well-known academics. So it's really basically saying that an academic position is no longer acceptable at the University of Lethbridge, and that I dispute the veracity of the unmarked graves. And I don't dispute the veracity of the unmarked graves, those unmarked graves that are in cemeteries. What I am disputing the veracity of is the arguments about clandestine burials. And with the Kamloops case, the 215 remains, this has been completely made up by the Kamloops band. There is no evidence for this, and it is very improbable that there are these 215 remains of children, because one, we just have ground penetrating radar. There is, I believe, one eyewitness account, but that comes from manipulation from Kevin Annett, who is a sort of rogue, defrocked minister of the United Church and his influence. And as well, there's not one parent who said that their child went missing. So this is a very legitimate area of contestation that we should be having. But this is very difficult in the way in which these ideologues are trying to stop open and honest discussion about this matter. Patrick Wilson from Anthropology is saying that my talk will re-traumatize vulnerable members of the community, and that I am not capable of intellectual engagement because I do not work in an evidence-based world. This is rich, because what is the evidence for the 215 clandestine burials at Kamloops? And I have written 2 pieces on this, Billy Remembers and Relative Truths and Rent Seeking. Those 2 articles are purely evidence-based about the fact that we don't really have any evidence to support this view. So these kinds of claims about evidence-based is really doesn't make any sense. I'll leave Carolyn Hode's free speech, hate speech. So these professors need to understand what hate speech is, and they don't. It is detestation, subjecting a group to detestation and vilification, and none of what I'm doing has anything to do with that. It is just about evidence-based argumentation. Suzanne Lennon from Sociology, again, with the not evidence-based. My work is not evidence-based. So in order to have arguments in an academic setting, you need to engage with views that are different from your own so that you can evaluate evidence, and this is not happening. This is the dean of the business school having an interaction with Don McIntyre and Andrea Omenlik. And so this whole interaction is just unbelievable. And I'm not going to get into that because it's going to take too long. And I've already mentioned the support network for academics of color plus. I don't know how many academics belong to that organization. But again, we see hateful propaganda and psychological harm all these sorts of things, and that SNAC Plus urgently calls for the talk to be canceled. A linguistics professor, First Nations Transition Program professor, and then, of course, all the social media activities. Now, in looking at these professors' positions, generally, they basically come in two forms. One is that academic free, although Paul Viminitz might have had academic freedom to have the space for me, this is irrelevant because threats of psychological harm supersede academic freedom. So they're arguing that academic freedom isn't the highest value in the university, that there are these other values such as psychological harm and so on. And if that's going to be the position, universities are over, because you could make that argument with respect to any idea that is disliked by a particular favored group. And we're just going to have the universities ripped apart if that's the case. So that's one line of argumentation. The other line of argumentation is that my views are not academic, and so therefore they are not covered by academic freedom. And the University of Lethbridge Faculty Association seems to be making this argument. But what they don't realize is that my views actually are engaging with views that I disagree with, putting forward the best evidence that I can muster to support my case, and using evidence and logic to try to make the best arguments possible. So what they are doing by saying that my views are not academic is that they're cutting off the debate and they're preventing any kind of academic discussion from occurring, which is incredibly irresponsible. You know, this is why we need to have openness in the universities. You can have, you know, I could be wrong. I realize that. I do realize that. But the ideologues have no realization of that whatsoever. They are closed to any oppositional viewpoints because they have a prescribed doctrine that they are insisting upon imposing on everyone else. So that gives you a bit of a sense of the terrible climate and the cultural problems that are in existence with respect to the professors at the University of Lethbridge. And what I wanted to look at specifically now is the Professor Carolyn Hodes, who is a women and gender studies professor. And I have done 3 posts specifically on Carolyn Hodes, which I just want to give a brief overview. So with respect to the first one, just to let you know what it is, we have Carolyn Hodes's email. And so to get into these PDF viewers, you just go and click on the chevron on the right upper right hand side, and then that will get you into the email that Carolyn Hodes sent. And Carolyn Hodes says that I was fired from academic institutions, so not just one academic institution, but more than one, due to her racism, transphobia, and bigotry. This is false. So for people who are concerned about evidence-based arguments and so on, for a professor at a university to make such an argument without any evidence, doesn't know what she is talking about, is shocking. And then what happened with respect to this email is that Carolyn Hodes CC'd, I believe, 8 other people on this email. One of them was Vice Provost in Niskim Indigenous Relations, Leroy Littlebear. And Leroy Littlebear then forwarded this email to President Mann, and President Mann thanked Leroy Littlebear for forwarding that email, said it was very helpful for him. So not only do you have this kind of defamation and very, very irresponsible conduct occurring, you have high-profile administrators encouraging this to happen. So what happened when I had Hodes's email forwarded to me by Paul Viminitz? I responded to Carolyn Hodes. I responded to President Mann, saying that, you know, I was very concerned about this email and explained why to President Mann. And I CC'd Carolyn Hodes on it, which then led to a huge, long exchange where I just kept on asking Dr. Hodes to provide me with evidence of what she was claiming. And she just basically refused to do this and then left the conversation in a huff. And, you know, sort of threatened to file complaints against the entire philosophy department and so on. It was really quite shocking behavior that happened with respect to Carolyn Hodes. So that was the first thing. So if you want to look at this exchange, that's quite interesting. And then, so that all happened. And then Carolyn Hodes, not satisfied with that embarrassing exchange, decided to go further and then wrote an article in, and this is just one page of this article, and where she talks about uncovering the remains of hundreds of children in a shallow mass grave at the former Blue Quills Indian Residential School. Now, Nina Green has done extensive research on this, which is also posted on the Woke Academy site. I highly recommend people look at that, but because there is no mass grave at the Blue Quills Indian Residential School, and in fact, we have an Indigenous person who was using an excavator for some strange reason and was bumping into all these graves and dislodging human remains, which I find is a shocking situation to be happening in a cemetery. So that is total misinformation that's being put forward. And then again, my dismissal is a direct result of her discriminatory treatment of colleagues and students. So now she's abandoned the racism and bigotry and transphobia and says that it's a result of discriminatory treatment. That is not true as well. So there were, and this is something that will be discussed more when the arbitration decision is reached, but basically, you know, my attempts to satirize wokeism was labeled as harassment, is the reasons why MRU fired me. But this is all going to come out when I can talk about this more. Anyway, this article is quite something, and I highly recommend people look at this. Anyway, so just so people know what it's called, it's in the journal, appropriately titled Feminist Asylum, because the way Carolyn Hodes is acting, you know, one could make the point that, you know, perhaps an asylum is not something that is out of line for kind of this, if this is serious, what she's putting forward. Anyway, settler colonialism induced feminist snap, where she talks about all the violence that she has endured because of her, you know, defamatory claims that she made about me and my attempts to respond and ask her for evidence. That's what she's taking issue with. Anyway, this is quite an amazing article, which goes through several pages. Anyway, I don't want to get into that there, but people should take a look at this, because it is, and the other thing too is Carolyn Hodes is on the editorial board of this quote unquote journal. So it's not exactly, you know, a high level of scholarship that it's going to be good. Anyway, so that is more absurdities from Carolyn Hodes. And then finally, I found this on LinkedIn, I believe. I just came across it. I don't know how I did that, but anyway, I wrote about Carolyn Hodes in the C2C journal. This is what this article is. Anyway, she's got a post, I believe it's on LinkedIn, and she's talking about a course that she's teaching. So she is going to be talking about the Charter Challenge in one of her courses. And, you know, one has to ask about the academic rigor of this course that she is going to be looking at this case in, and she's talking about that this court case is about hate speech, the ability or lack thereof of those targeted for violent speech to slap back, psychological safety, the equality rights and the freedom of expression and assembly of marginalized groups on campus. Note, I am not referring to the anti-woke brigade. So one can see, it would be interesting to take a look at this, how this is taught, to see if it has the kind of standard that one would expect from an academic institution. And because Carolyn Hodes seems to be completely opposed to any kind of academic discussion and is just interested in getting people canceled and then filing in a bizarre way harassment complaints against members of the philosophy department, which had nothing to even to do with my invitation to the University of Lethbridge, is very, very surprising. Anyway, so for people who are interested in these documents, once again, it's in this post, this one post, which is talking about the third academic freedom destroyer, which is the Professor-Ideologues at the University of Lethbridge. Anyway, so I thought I would do a video on the professoriate, the ideologues who are professors at the University of Lethbridge, because I think that if you have professors who don't respect academic freedom and want to cancel those who disagree with them and are completely opposed to any evaluation of evidence and engagement with arguments that dispute different viewpoints, one can see that we're in serious trouble at universities. And I am very fearful for the future because of the types of hiring that has been done at different institutions. And I personally have noticed over the years, because I've been in the university system since the 90s, I noticed starting about 2010 that things started to change, and especially in 2014. And a lot of this has to do with the kinds of hiring that was done in around 2010. Anyway, I think that is at least helpful in introducing people to the documents that I have been using to try to talk about academic freedom destroyed at the University of Lethbridge. And I am going to be writing about this in detail over the next number of months. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you at the event tomorrow, which is on March 2nd, 2024 at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you very much.